Bienvenue.
Welcome to the 48th meeting of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. For the first hour, we have with us witnesses relating to our study on women veterans and their experience in the armed forces. And in the second hour, we will undertake committee business. For this first hour, we have witnesses.
With our witnesses, just want to remind everybody we're continue on our study tonight with our experience of women veterans, and so we do have with us two witnesses here in person, and I believe we've got one witness online as well. Just so everyone knows, I will be chairing at least the first portion of the meeting. We do expect the chair to arrive at some point during that first hour or thereabouts, and probably we'll chair the second portion of the meeting when we move to our in-camera portion. He's asked me to fill in kind of unexpectedly, so I'm going to do that until he arrives. And so with the first hour, we will have our witnesses on the study. We're joined here in person by two members, Karen McCrimmon, former Member of Parliament and Lieutenant Colonel retired. And we also have with us the Honourable Rebecca Patterson, Senator from Ontario. And then we also have with us, I guess online, I believe, is Leanne Quinn, who is a Major retired and a nurse practitioner. She's joining us by video conference this evening. So we'll move right into our testimony. Just want to remind everybody that if there's anything that we deal with this evening that causes you any concern, or you'd like to seek assistance as a result of sensitive matters that we may have to deal with, please do reach out to our clerk. That applies to our witnesses as well as to anyone else in the room, including our members. Please do reach out, and we can help to make sure that is provided to you. So, we'll all introduce our first witness, and we'll maybe start with Senator Patterson. I'll turn the floor to you to make some opening remarks. You do have 5 minutes to make some opening remarks, so the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So good evening, honourable members. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss the experiences of female and women veterans. As the first woman CAF veteran appointed to the Senate, I appear before you as a fellow parliamentarian, but as a veteran myself, having fully retired in January of 2023. I enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces in January of 1989, and this was the same month that women started integration into all occupations except submarines. I personally experienced great advances for women since '89. For example, I'm the first person with a military nursing background to lead at the rank of Flag Officer, Rear Admiral, which was previously unheard of when I joined. What has been slower to adapt is who we recognize as female and women veterans and the support we provide to them. Veterans are traditionally portrayed as white, older men who are war fighters, resulting in women being less likely to identify and then be recognized as veterans who need service. This results in veteran services that are not tailored for sex and gender-specific issues. Prior to my appointment at the Senate, I've served in many different military domains. My experience is diverse and includes addressing sexual misconduct and culture change in the CAF, as well as leading military health care at the height of the pandemic and through the establishment of the Women's Health Program. I was also the Defence Champion for Women and facilitated the establishment of the Defence Team Pride Network, for which I was the interim champion. I understand the people who serve. Women are one of the fastest growing segments of military veterans in Canada, and the systems of support for women and veterans were designed based on the male experience. This stems from research focusing on male veterans while being presented as gender neutral. We have learned in healthcare that gender neutral excludes women. While I don't deny we share common experiences, more research is needed on the different sex and gender-specific health and well-being requirements. And I want to state clearly, you cannot address female and women's health without addressing their health while serving in the Canadian Armed Forces or as members of the RCMP. What does this mean? Ideally, we prevent harm to women in the first place, so they don't need to seek veteran services from back. It's about the continuity between active service and the support they receive for service-related injuries and illnesses. Women veterans' health is occupational health related. It sits on a continuum between an initial event during service and their current well-being as a veteran. This remains true whether the disability presents itself immediately or in the future, and we absolutely cannot ignore this reality. To improve transition and integration into post-service life and potentially prevent injury to current CAF members, information exchange between CAF and VAC is essential. By routinely sharing data such as injury and illness patterns and trends, we can better understand the impact of military service on women and better prepare for services veterans will require and fund them. Veterans are not a homogeneous group. They are an intersection of identities that influence experiences and expectations for the supports they seek and need post-service. Therefore, I would also caution not to conflate female and women veteran service requirements along with those of other equity-seeking groups. We cannot lump together all those with diverse needs into one program or one funding group without inevitably failing to address key areas that are unique to each specific group. All groups should be considered individually, though harmoniously, so we can ensure equity and ultimately better lived experiences for those who have sustained harm in service of our country. My final point I would like to raise before questions. The ideal outcome is equitable and fair support for CAF and RCMP members and veterans. The CAF is modernizing and changing, which means our veterans' needs are changing as well. VAC's mandate to support the well-being of veterans and their families and to promote remembrance of achievements shouldn't be seen as a barrier to doing things differently. We must be proactive in anticipating veteran needs and not reactive, as is unfortunately so often the case. So for Canadians who are willing to give their all in service of the country, we deserve better. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And we'll now, for her opening remarks, we'll turn to Ms. Karen McCrimmon for the next 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the honourable members here tonight. It's an honour to be with you today and share the experiences, and perhaps I'd like to give you some ideas on how you can help make a difference. I'll get right to the point. With 5 minutes, I might be speaking quickly, but I'll do my very best. We need you to ask the tough questions and listen to the answers. And it might seem obvious, but sometimes we need to be reminded that we can't actually solve the problems until we really understand them. And then once you've listened, then you need to action them. And that's why I'm very grateful for the opportunity. You've asked the question. That's so important. Step number one, and we appreciate it very much. Point number two, ask for a plan. There's a saying in the military, failing to plan is planning to fail. To make any type of major changes inside an organization, you need a comprehensive, coordinated, and measurable plan. Ask for it. 3, what you permit, you promote. And I would argue that the RCMP, the CAF, and the VAC have permitted the neglect and abuse of women and other groups who did not fit into their view of the ideal or acceptable RCMP officer, soldier, or veteran. This needs to stop. Point 4, representation matters. You need a critical mass of committed individuals to confront and change a harmful climate or culture. Today in the military and the RCMP, a considerable number of women are now rising into the senior and influential positions of their organizations. And we're starting to see real changes happening in culture and in awareness of women-specific issues. However, we don't see that same representative change in VAC. We need more women at decision-making levels and more veterans, men and women. As such, one easy starting point would be the naming of a fully empowered and fully funded ministerial advisory board for women veterans. So in short, hire more veterans, especially women, who have planning expertise or proven hands-on experience. Women are 50% of the military's future recruiting pool. Not fixing the military women-specific issues found within VAC, CAF, and the RCMP will clearly have significant follow-on effects for these organizations. Point 5. Feedback loops prevent more harm. I'm glad I heard the senator say exactly the same thing. How does Veterans Affairs capture injury trends or illnesses like cancers, and how do they feed that back, that important information upstream, back to the military, back to the RCMP to prevent more injury? Where's the feedback loop inside VAC for decisions that have been overturned by the VRAB? I don't even know if there is one. Physical injuries like musculoskeletal injuries are still being caused today by equipment and uniforms that weren't designed for a woman's body. Uniforms and equipment are all replaced periodically, so there needs to be a continual assessment of their suitability for women. This is where GBA comes to play. There is also psychological and spiritual or emotional injuries like PTSD, moral injury, and institutional betrayal that are also still happening because we aren't asking the tough questions and listening to the answers, especially when the listening hurts. Listening needs to be followed by action. So in closing, how can this committee best help hold VAC accountable for improving the health and well-being of women veterans? You must demand, 1, to see a strategic plan. Once again, failing to plan is planning to fail. 2, demand more data collection, research, and transparency to veterans and the public, including sex-segregated data on VAC and VRAB claim processes, representation, budgets, and spending. 3, we need more women and veterans within the department, case managers, supervisors, project officers, researchers, etc. And 4, we need the establishment of feedback loops to all relevant departments to prevent reoccurrences of negative or harmful circumstances. And finally, if we want real change, we must remember that whatever behavior we reward is the behavior we are going to get. We must demand, expect, and reward better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McCrimmon. And our final opening remarks from our witnesses will come from Leanne Quinn, who's with us online. The floor is now yours for the next 5 minutes, Ms. Quinn.
Thank you very much, Chair and honorable members. Thank you for this invite. I must admit right up front that I did not really understand or anticipate what was going to be expected this evening, so I don't have a great big script in front of me that has been written. I just know this is that I've had 23 years of regular force experience and then 4 years as an honorary lieutenant colonel for a reserve unit in my hometown that covers Peterborough, Coburg, and Belleville. And I have, over my years of experience, have seen a lot of changes. I've seen some good and some bad. And obviously, as my 2 predecessors have spoken about, more changes are definitely needed in order to bring the standards of equality up to where they should be. I could give lots of examples, but I don't think that this is the forum to do that. I'm mostly here to listen and participate when I am asked to do so.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Quinn, and I do apologize that if we failed as a committee to make sure that you had the understanding of exactly what would transpire. I do apologize on our behalf for that. But certainly glad that you're here with us and that you are going to be able to contribute to the question and answers, which will come now. And I know that you'll have lots of good insight to provide us. And I just want to thank all of our witnesses for their opening remarks, and all three of you as well for your service to our country. We can never say that enough, and we can never do enough to try to honor it. And this study is certainly a part of that. And you being here tonight will be very helpful to us as a committee in that, without a question. So we'll now turn to our rounds of questioning. And our first questions, the first round, we have 6 minutes per round. And our first up in the first round is Michelle Ferrari. So the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having me today. Honored to be here, and again, reiterate what the chair has said. Thank you for your service. You know, I'm gonna toot Leanne's horn a little bit here, because I think she didn't tell you what she's accomplished, and I think it's really important that we all know it. Leanne Quinn has received the Order of Military Merit Award, the highest order a member of the military can receive. She was the honorary lieutenant colonel to the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment. She is an all-star athlete. She's a Guinness World Record holder. She's an RN. She's a nurse practitioner. She received the Florence Nightingale Award in 2007 as Canada's top nurse. She has served and practiced medicine around the world in war-torn countries. She is also a survivor of PTSD. And for me to tell you the magnitude of what this woman is, I think that does it in a little bit of a nutshell. And Leanne brings so much knowledge and compassion that it is such an honor to say she's from my riding. And Leanne, this study really is to help us as parliamentarians and as, here in Parliament to do better. And I think you have the knowledge inside of your head to help us do that. And I think one of the key issues in the study is around women veterans, but around mental health. And I would love you, if you're comfortable, without triggering you or causing you too much distress, what you could suggest to parliamentarians around Veterans Affairs in supporting women, and in particular around the mental and physical health aspect. And please feel free to give as many examples as possible of what we could do better.
Thank you for your kind words, MP Michelle Ferrari. Yes, so as Michelle alluded to, yes, I am a PTSD survivor. And I guess the first thing that I could say is that the advertising and the offering of support from Veterans Affairs when I left the Canadian Forces, I did not tap into it for 5 years post-military career, and that's due to a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is that I just didn't know what Veterans Affairs had to offer for me. And so I think that one important part is that you need to reach out to those that are retiring, those that are veterans, that you are a service that is offered that can help pave the path for individuals to get some help. I know that improvements have been made on that level of voice and advertising. I still hear it from my friends that have had recent retirements from the military that they really don't know what they can ask or who to ask at the Veterans Affairs, and so they ask for guidance from myself in order to take those steps. So yeah.
Sorry, that's great. That's great. And I think, navigating the system is a big challenge in a lot of bureaucracy as well. I also want to point out that Leanne helps and opened up a clinic in our community on her own time to help those most vulnerable living on the street. It just can't say enough about what this human brings to the table. I think it's a bit of a rock and a hard place because you don't want to dismiss the value of what the Canadian Forces brought to your life, if I may be so bold as to say, but to also sort of say, listen, there is a lot of room for improvement. So I guess I would put it back to you, Leanne, and ask you if you could, some key things that you would like to see done differently, if there are any key things that jump out at you, or specific examples you would like to give the committee.
Yes, so some key things that jump out to me is I'm not speaking specifically as a retired regular military officer. My next little talk will be in reference to my position as the honorary lieutenant colonel with an Army reserve unit. In that, I will tell you incidences that happened to me were definitely the result that I was a female of short stature, and the honorary colonel and honorary lieutenant colonel prior to me assuming that position. There's no way that that neglect or prejudice would have been handed to them, because they just they would not have tolerated it. So I would say that. If there's some help needed from my end in looking at the grand picture, the assistance is needed in the reserve units, in particular, because I can only speak with an Army Reserve, the Army's Reserve unit that I was honorary colonel for, and enlightening them to the fact that females can hold positions that require respect as well.
Thank you. And that's the time we have for that particular block of questions. And we'll move to our second block of questions, and we have Rechi Valdez for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses who have joined us today. It's truly an honor to be able to hear your testimony, and thank you so much for your sacrifice for our country. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to direct my questions to former Lieutenant Colonel McCrimmon. As the first woman to command a Canadian Forces Air Force squadron, I wanted to get your perspective on what the different needs are between women veterans who work for either the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, if you have any insight there.
Oh, thank you very much for that question. I think it's really important. My background is Army and then Air Force, and the Senator's is Navy, and Leanne's is Air Force and Army. So we have a lot of everything here. But I think we can say that environmentally, yes, there are some specifics of equipment that didn't work, or uniforms that didn't fit, or boots and webbing, and even the size of certain weaponry that you were expected to operate. There are differences amongst the services. But it all comes down to being, you want CAF and VAC to be willing to say, well, it's different. We have to, every time we order a new piece of equipment, we have to make sure it fits women as well as fitting men. And so we can probably all tell you stories of particular pieces of equipment that didn't fit. Flak jackets for me in Afghanistan, and I'm a fairly normal stature, but they didn't fit. They were very uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time. I've heard they've gotten better. That was good. This was about 20 years ago. I was in Afghanistan. But that's what we need, that continual improvement. You just can't do it once and forget about it.
Thank you. And you had given your 5 recommendations to the committee already. So I'm going to just ask Senator Patterson if you wanted to weigh in on any legislative or mandate changes that you would recommend, if you have like a top 3 or 5.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think that I'm going to, because I'm so new, I haven't filled out my paperwork, which I'm going to go. Leanne, it's wonderful to see you, by the way. Wonderful. I think what's really important is that when we're looking, is it legislative changes or is it improving policy and process as we move forward? I think mandate letters are something that really need to be considered as we move forward with what the role of VAC is. I will use my previous CAF experience to be told, well, we don't do that. It's not in our mandate letter. It isn't because there are bad people there. These are people who are short-staffed, et cetera, but it is not an excuse when you're trying to access services, and the Canadian Armed Forces can only fill that gap. So when we look at mandate letters, for example, that it has to be VAC reaches out to you rather than you trying to go and find VAC. And even if you choose not to do something at that point as a veteran, that's okay. But that, we were told that's not in our mandate letter. So I think that you probably need to review mandate to make sure that there is not that gap. Have things improved? Absolutely, of which I believe there are other committees that are going to talk to that very effect. But you can't just talk to the CAF or the RCMP about that. You have to talk to VAC probably at the same time. So I would suggest maybe not legislative policy change. The next thing I think you also need to have a look at is you have to name it. Include the word woman, veteran. It's not a dirty word. It's not a qualifier. And so when, whether it be in mandate letters or wherever, you need to disaggregate veteran, not all the time, but at times. When you're talking about it, call it what it is. If you hide the language, it doesn't exist. That's my culture background coming in. So as you see, there may not be mandate letter issues, it may not be legislative changes right now. I don't have that depth of knowledge. I will have to pass that to my colleagues. But I would suggest that start there, and even on your committee, everything you talk about women veterans. And I think that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Patterson, real quick, we always talk about the transition into civilian life, and you've been successfully able to do it, all three of you actually. Can you give some advice as to what we can include as what made you successful to be able to pursue these careers after serving?
I think I'm still in transition, if I was honest with you. But thank you. Good question. I think we have to understand cultures in institutions like the Canadian Armed Forces and the RCMP. This is our family. This is our world. What is the hardest part for transition is going to nothing. You lose purpose. You get called misses, like we lose a lot of pieces. So that is not an issue in and of itself. But what can happen with improvement of services is if you have a community that is used to having structure around them, not because we're automatons and can't think for ourselves, but it's the world that we come from, to make transition smoother. And this is why that cinch between VAC, RCMP, and the Canadian Armed Forces is so important. So you don't leave people struggling. Who am I? Connection, making people feel like they're put together is going to be quite important. So I would recommend that as a committee you do look at transition services, name it for what it is, and remember women veterans are less likely to seek follow-on VAC services than men, because we don't always see ourselves in that. So if you can make recommendations surrounding the transition services, naming it what it is, and having a pull system or like a push system to the veteran rather than having them chase you down.
Thank you.
Merci. Et pour le
Thank you. And for the next round, we have Ms. Normandin. Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking the three witnesses, not only for your participation, but for your service. And that the example you're giving as women here before the committee, and Ms. Senator Patterson, today the government made an announcement with regard to homelessness for veterans. And in that announcement, I think there were veterans from indigenous communities, LGBT, Black. They have more problems for homelessness, and I would like to ask you, have you had any experience with regard to veterans and the problem of homelessness?
Est-ce que c'est possible de répondre en anglais?
May I respond in English? It's easier for me.
Bien. I have worked with homeless veterans, with Soldiers Helping Soldiers, and while it's a small group, and with groups Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, the one thing that we do notice is that women veterans are absolutely invisible, and they could be living rough. They could, meaning they're couch surfing, etc., or they are homeless and they are lost in the system. So what we are finding is that you can't find them, and then when you bring them in, and if you clump them with other men veterans, many have suffered significant abuse, military sexual trauma, etc. So I was certainly excited to hear about this announcement today, but I think it's going to be critical that we look at pushing forward with sex and gender specific research on who women, homeless women are, sorry, my French and English are mushing in my head, veterans are, as well as some of the, I say root causes, but the complex issues that contribute to homelessness in women veteran. And then, of course, I think there also is a requirement where VAC does need to step up and look at sex and gender specific programs to move them beyond homelessness into benefits onto homelessness. And so it is a very dire problem, because what we aren't talking about is those that don't make it, that overdose, that commit suicide, that die at the hands of violent abuse. And I really think that this announcement is promising, but I didn't once hear the word woman in there.
Et justement, sur cet aspect-là, le fait que vous ayez
And yes, since you didn't hear any mention of women veterans, and is this something that you often see when there's an announcement with regard to veterans, and maybe we tend to forget women veterans in a number of the measures and analyses?
Je suis vraiment d'accord. Merci.
I totally agree. Yes, I'd like to hear from any of the witnesses when programs, for example, we've heard about the problem of resources, and I would, for example, when the minister referred to the community subsidy for community services, but often services are far from the base and so difficult to access. So is there any way of ensuring a better accessibility for this kind of service?
Pour les deux.
Thank you.
Merci.
I think, and I think Leanne hit it right on the head, in that it starts at transition. Let's go back. Homelessness is often as a result of that loss of community, that loss of family. And it's the first 2 to 4 years after release from the military where they're most vulnerable. So, and then if they're removed, if they're far away from their support structure, that makes it even worse. And so that's why when we talk about transition from CAF to VAC, we have to make that stronger. And people who have suffered like psychological injuries from inside the CAF or RCMP, they're going to have a really tough time during transition. It's going to hurt. So I've seen some people have suggested, why not for that first 2 or 3 years, that transition period, allow them to come to VAC, no questions asked. Don't wait till it's a crisis. If you're struggling with something, don't wait for a crisis. Come and see us. And as the Senator said, let's keep track of them. Let's not just let them go. So it's that transition period that is absolutely key.
If I may add, Mr. Hello. So I'm going to build on that, because if you think about most people who leave the Canadian Armed Forces, men and women, are not homeless or living rough. There are some, but most are not. So what is key in that transition period is not only expecting VAC to do all of this, because that is not going to be possible. We have veterans in every corner of this country and internationally, and that's one of the VAC's challenges, respect where respect comes from. But I think within Canada, within the domain that we can control, I do believe that there is a place that, whether it be through the justice system, through healthcare systems, that there is a global sensitization to what a veteran is, that we have obligatory reporting in healthcare for people who, have challenges on suicide, homicide, or pedophilia. This is not what I'm referring to. But if we can also sensitize the Canadian public to acknowledge that veterans exist, and particularly women veterans, ensure that they're getting into that care support to begin with, or that our policing and our justice system is aware, and you build into that at least a point of contact, call whomever, that these people don't fall through the cracks, and especially with women, because they are invisible. And if a woman has been experiencing, say, domestic violence, or has experienced severe military sexual trauma that has had them hospitalized, people don't know what to do with them. Well, you're a veteran. Well, it's like you went to the University of Ottawa. I went there, that's why I said that. And we forget that this comes from like another life. So I think if we could do that, sensitize beyond VAC into our Canadian system, that would be very helpful. If you can make a recommendation like that, I'd be so proud.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Normandin.
Thank you very much, Ms. Normandin. And welcome to our new, Deputy Chair. And now, Ms. Blinny, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see you back. And I just want to thank all three of you. I want to thank all three of you for being here to testify, and also just to thank you for your incredible service. I did a little bit of research on all three of you before I came here, and I just have to say it's overwhelming, the amazing things you've done. So I just want to recognize all three of you for that incredible service to our country and to humanity as a whole. I think, going through this study, I hear two things. One, and you've all said it today, is the word invisible. Women are invisible. And the other thing that I've heard from a lot of veterans is the lost opportunity, that if our CAF, our RCMP, and our VAC actually served women more meaningfully, the opportunities that would come out of that would be profound. So I'm hoping that we can identify how women become invisible and how to change that so that we can see that opportunity increase on the other side. I'm just going to ask all of you the first question. Let's go back to the word invisible. And I heard clearly that when things are gender neutral, it just ignores women. And we know that women, again and again, veterans have told me that when they have a health issue, they're often told that it has nothing to do with their service. But we also know there's no research done to actually find out if it is to the service, and it doesn't seem to be of interest. And so often they are put in a position where they have to appeal repeatedly to try to get their issue addressed. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that and what we could do differently. And Leanne, if I could start with you, I would really appreciate it with your expertise in this subject.
Thank you very much. The invisibility, unfortunately, numbers speak volumes, and we know that the number of male veterans in comparison to the number of female veterans, the males are much higher. And just in general, it doesn't matter what you're looking at, the greatest number gets the majority. And I think that in itself is part of the issue is simply the small volume. If you look at the number of homeless female veterans in comparison to the number of male homeless veterans, you would soon find out that there are a lot more male than there are female. And so obviously what I think is happening is that we are just ignored, or we're just invisible because of our small numbers. I don't know how to fix that. I don't have any magic pill to make that better, but I do know that the awareness of Veterans Affairs in reference to this, this invisibleness of the female population, it needs to be brought to light.
I think that's an excellent question. And how do we deal with that? If you look at the homelessness issue, the big problem for women veterans is that they are invisible because we can't find them. They don't go to the homeless shelters. The homeless shelters are too dangerous for women. So what they do, as the senator mentioned, they couch surf, or they some of them do kind of live rough, and we don't see them immediately, and that's why they're invisible. So, and I think it does go back to making sure that VAC tracks these people, especially people who are being released on a medical release, right? They should be tracked. They should not rely on them to come back to VAC. VAC should say, where are you and how are you doing? So I think that's one thing that could make a difference. And again, for me, I think the transition issue is also something. But as Leanne mentioned, she didn't go back to VAC for 5 years. Me neither, right? I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. I'm strong. I can deal. We don't want to admit that we could use some help. I would say a lot of my veteran friends feel exactly that way. They don't want to admit it. So if there was an easy way, without having to go through all the paperwork and without having to end up in a crisis, to go back to VAC and say, I would like to talk to somebody. Let's make it easy for them during that period. Let's make it so it doesn't have to become a crisis.
And I'm going to go a bit more macro. So when we talk about being invisible, I can give examples in research. You have to do research on this. So you can have, the numbers are too statistically small to track, but it's used to not do anything. We have to move beyond that. This is where you start with partnering with other nations to see how they're tracking them. The U.S., for example, which is why we've talked about the board. You start there. And if Canada is truly committed to their, I'm going to say women veterans here, all veterans, but I need to talk about women here, we will take those statistics, blend them with what we've got, and start off, even if we over-program to begin with, and we move back afterwards. If you build it, they will come. And so I would suggest that the statistically insignificant numbers that we often get in terms of research, whether it's women's, female and women's suicide in the Canadian Armed Forces or as veterans, we should not accept that anymore. So I would really, if there is a way of building into a recommendation, into research, is that statistically insignificant numbers are not an excuse to do nothing. That was so many negatives, and I'm sorry. That if we can then look at getting the boards together and partnering with other nations so we can at least start somewhere.
Thank you, Ms. Blenny. And now let's go to Mr. Shane Casey for 5 minutes or less, please. Sorry, Mr. Casey. Wow, okay, Okay, sorry, it's my friend Fraser told me you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
I really like being your friend. Yeah, thank you, Chair. And we've faced some difficult subjects while we've been doing this study. And one of the things that I wanted to address that had come up in a previous study regarding the Afghan monument, which has not yet been built. It's not been decided upon. I think it's been in design phase since 2019, and it hasn't been finalized yet, as I said. This is the first conflict in which we've had female soldiers and we've had combat losses, female combat losses. And so I would like to get a sense of the witnesses' ideas on recognition and recognition of having a monument in this nation's capital for this. And so, Ms. Quinn, can I ask you first? And again, I want to thank you for your service. That's important. I'm very, very proud to be sitting in this room with you and online, and proud of your service and what you've done for our nation. Thank you. Ms. Quinn.
Thank you very much, sir. In reference to a monument depicting a female, I would be ecstatic to see a female soldier in any monument, a female soldier with their combat flak jacket on, with their helmet on, with their weapon strapped over their shoulder, and with a ponytail. If you cannot distinguish if they're male or female, put the ponytail in there. I think we're severely lacking in that department across the country. I was part of a steering committee that established a peacekeeping monument in the city of Peterborough, and there were 5 bids on the monument, 5 artists. And not one of the artists presented a maquette of the monument with a female in pose position. And that was so disappointing to me. It was a 14-year project, and we ended up choosing a beautiful monument that neither has male or female, but 2 large pillars with some words of wisdom from Major General Lou Mackenzie, as well as some words of citizens from the city of Peterborough. So yes, it is missing, and yes, I would love to see it because we deserve it.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn. And while I've got you, and I'm sorry to not address the other witnesses here, you mentioned recognition, and one of the great things about being in the military is becoming an honorary colonel. And you mentioned in your introduction about being treated differently as an honorary colonel. Could you expand on that for me, please?
Yes. So, listen, I was extremely honored to be asked to be the honorary colonel of the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment. I was the first female in 100 years to hold that position. And I entered it and stayed with it for 4 entire years, giving it my all, because number 1, that's what I do, and number 2, that's what the regiment deserved, and that's what the soldiers deserved. My huge disappointment came upon any of my requests as the honorary colonel were second-guessed, were given a back seat, to the extent where during the unveiling of this, and this is one small example, the unveiling of this peacekeeping monument, Major General Lou Mackenzie, retired of course, our number 1 peacekeeper in Canada, had agreed to come to the event. I had city members, parliament members, peacekeepers from across Canada coming to this unveiling event, along with the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment, who told me that they would have 6 honorary guards to take the salute for Major General Lou Mackenzie. 2 days before the unveiling of that monument, I received an email from the captain, not even from the commanding officer of that regiment, from a captain of that regiment, to tell me that there would be no soldiers present to take the salute from Major General Lou Mackenzie. Period. The end. It was holiday time, and there would not be any. 2 days before that event, I will sit here and tell you that there is no way that those comments and that reason ever would have been presented to a male honorary lieutenant colonel who was filling my boots prior to when I took the position. It would not have been. But because it was me you were going to take it and suck it up, and there would be nothing done in reference to it.
I'm sure that was very difficult for you to share, but I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolmie. And now let's go to Mr. Sean Casey for 5 minutes or less. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here and for your service. I can't help myself. I'm going to have to pose the questions to my former colleague, Ms. McCrimmon. I want to start with it's pretty darn obvious the reasons why a woman wouldn't go into the Canadian Armed Forces now, given all of the recent developments. So my question to you, as someone who has served and someone who's been a parliamentary secretary and who's been in this seat, is what advice do you have for government? What advice do you have for us? What advice do you have for the department in terms of the recruitment and retention of people choosing this as a career?
Well, that's an excellent question, because as I said in my remarks, women are 50% of the future recruiting pool. So if we don't fix this, if we don't make CAF and the RCMP the employers of the 21st century, that a place that women can go and serve and feel respected and safe and valued, you're just not going to be able to hire women. And as time goes on, in the military, you know the brain power that we're wasting. We are wasting brain power. Brilliant women, and they're having to deal with and put up with a system that's 100 years old. And so it needs to change, but it takes leadership to change it, and a will. We need the will and the acknowledgement that this is what's going on. But and it's not just the military. So let's or the RCMP. I mean, this kind of thing happens in our society as a whole, and I think the military. I think because we do track things. We do statistics, and we do follow on cases when there has been abuse or neglect. We're always targeted first, but the same thing happens, I would say, in just about every single workplace in this country. Women are mistreated. And so I would say to the government, and I would say to CAF and to VAC and to the RCMP, lead the way. You know how to lead. You know what needs to be done. Set the example. Because if the rest of the country looks at CAF and says, oh, they've got this figured out, people want to be part of that organization, then they'll say, well, we want to have the same thing. We want the same quality of candidate to come and work for us. So that's what I would say. I would say, you know what leadership is. You do know what needs to get done. I think there's some tweaks, some advice that we could possibly offer in that regard. But choose to be the example of the future. And the whole country will be better off because of it.
Thank you. My next question is for the other two witnesses here, Senator Patterson and Ms. Quinn. And I ask you this question because of your experience with the homeless community and the fact that there was a significant announcement today which has two funding streams. One is for supports and services, but the other is for capacity building. And this capacity building is for funding for research for veterans' homelessness. The portal opens today and is open for the next 8 weeks. Based on what you've said already, it strikes me that you have people within your network, you have organizations that you know because you're in this space who could benefit from this funding, particularly as it relates to the unique challenges of women homeless veterans. This is as much a plea as a question. Please help get the word out there that this funding is available to fill this gap that you've identified. And I'd be happy to hear from either of you on your perspectives as to the potential benefit of an investment like this.
Mrs. Quinn, you can start, but we only have 40 minutes, seconds, I should say, to answer the question. Please go ahead.
Okay, yes, I would simply say that in my position in my clinic, it would be my responsibility to get that message out to the homeless females because they have no communications ability. So you gave the information to me, I get it to them.
Yeah, I think what I would also do to build on that is you need to put in the research money and you need to attract people, or VAC does, attract people to do the research that we need that I talked about a little bit earlier. There has to be investment there. And then, because you're looking at capability building, you need to build a very strong peer support network that has whatever platform possible. I know we're running out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Et là, nous avons...
And now we have the two last members, 2.5 minutes each. Ms. Normandin. Thank you very much, Chair. My question will be, Ms. McKimmon, we know that the committee recently found that a research team has been created for veterans, should there not be better collaboration between the armed forces and Veterans Affairs for identifying the symptoms and especially the causes of these problems?
Bien. Et comme j'ai dit auparavant,
like I said earlier, there has to be an exchange of data.
Date letters, and we need to state that in order for you to do cause and effect, because let's stop creating harmed veterans. Let me be a veteran because I served in an amazing career and move forward. So in the absence of appropriate feedback mechanisms, that's put into mandate letters for defense and for veterans, and I would suggest RCMP. I'm not quite as knowledgeable there. I'm going to put that as a first intervention, knowing you only have 2 minutes. Leanne, do you have anything? I'll pass to you.
I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
And in the same vein, as far as you know, there's a difference between there's a difference in capacity. Do they have the capacity at Veterans Affairs and in the Armed Forces, an ability to actually analyze these things?
Data sets. Because the Canadian Armed Forces has its own healthcare system, they provide health care. So they have access to what we would call epidemiological data to look at, whether it be diagnosis, sometimes you can find mechanism of injury. Versus Veterans Affairs, they don't provide health care. They provide, and please apologize for anyone from veterans who's listening. It's like an insurance company. They provide benefits and programs and support them rather than they deliver some but not all. So they're going to have different data sets. I think what is key is that there is a collaboration to determine what data needs to be collected so it becomes useful information to create that cause effect that you were talking about, and like I said, maybe prevent more people being injured, and especially on women.
Thank you so much. And now let's go to Miss Rachel Blenny for 2.5 minutes, please.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chair. And I want to come back to the idea of data because it goes back to the idea of invisibility again. If you don't track it, then you don't know it, and then it's invisible. And the other part is the feedback loop, which I think is really important. So I guess my question, I'm going to start with Senator Patterson first, if that's okay, is the departments are not very good at talking to each other. Like CAF and VAC, the communication is very poor. And so trying to support veterans when they get to that stage of their career can be very hard because the data isn't smoothly passed over in a way that they can look at it and make decisions. So I'm just wondering, how do you see that? Because we need to sort of get some ideas, like how would that work, and how can we sort of encourage those two to work together, and RCMP as well?
Right. So I do have to speak very positively for the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence and the efforts they put into creating these transition working groups. But in order to do it, you have to have someone to receive it and someone to want to receive it. So that isn't a criticism towards VAC. So I just wanted to establish that framework. So there are already mechanisms in place between VAC and CAF, and I cannot speak to the RCMP, to actually create that space. And so I think they can do it. They know what they're doing, what they need to look for. They have access to funded research through CIMBER. I'm sure you've heard about that group. So I think as part of a recommendation, it really has to be, we need you to work together to get these feedback loops, data exchange, so it becomes information. And so that is what I'd recommend. It's pretty macro level, but there are mechanisms in place that need to be enhanced.
And I've heard a couple of times about having a women's veterans advisory. I'm just wondering if you have an idea of a model that you think is successful or ideas of what that could look like.
Thank you for that question. I think we have to remember that we're not the United States of America. And while they are our fabulous cousins to the south, we are not them. Our experiences in service are similar but not the same. So if you said to me, is there one ideal model? The answer is always no. We need to look to do the research to figure out what this should look like and talk to veterans. Right? And so I think that a recommendation could be to consider the development of, but again, looking to other models, and then coming up with one that is going to work. But it must include women. You have to use that word in it, and go that direction.
Merci beaucoup. Et...
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. But before saying goodbye to our witnesses, I would like to first say that you may have noticed that we have two clerks with us today, and that's because our clerk, Ms. Heller, has been promoted and she will be leaving us. So she's been sent to another committee. So on behalf of the committee members, thank you so much for the work that you've done for us to facilitate our work, including this evening. And I would also like to warmly welcome Sasha Alexander Vasiliev, who will taking the place of our clerk. And of course, our analyst Sasha is still there, and he's been with us since 2015. So. Finally, thank you so much to our witnesses. Thank you for your patience. Thank you as well for participating remotely and for assisting us in developing our recommendations for this important study. And I would also like to thank Honourable Senator Patterson from Ontario, and our former colleague, Karen McCrimmon, Lieutenant Colonel, retired, and Ms. Leanne Quinn, Major, retired, a nurse practitioner who is with us online. Thank you once again, and I hope you will continue to follow our work on this topic. And before suspending, I would since we're going to be in camera to discuss the business of the committee, I would ask only members and staff to remain in the room. And thank you again.
you.